and you said that Russia will test West, global West, and I have read the same ethical articles which were published at the beginning of this year, some others. And what do you think, which will be the result of these tests?
I think we're already seeing the result, which is that the United States is ready to negotiate with Putin, and this is already the first step to disaster. If someone is trying to blackmail you, you should not negotiate with the blackmailer, you should go to the police or do something to deter the blackmailer. And the West is failing to do this, so I'm angry and alarmed.
Could the Ukrainian expect something more than negotiation with Russia?
Absolutely, and what we should be doing is giving Ukraine the means it needs to defend itself. We should be supplying first of all, loans to stabilise the economy, because the economy is coming under pressure. We should be sending military equipment. We should be having military exercises in the Black Sea region to show that we are ready to deter any kind of military attack. And we should be making it really clear to the Russians that this is not going to work. This is going to cost them, not benefit them. But we're not doing that.
Should Ukrainians expect some reaction from NATO?
I think that NATO needs to show that it's worth the money we spend on it. At the moment, NATO is almost invisible in this. The talks are with the United States, and NATO is kind of in the back seat, not the front seat. So, as I said, I think NATO should hold a big out-of-sequence exercise right now in the Baltic states and the Black Sea, but to show that it has the ability to respond quickly and effectively to any kind of Russian provocation.
Do you feel that America really back to Europe?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm afraid that in America there are two dangerous tendencies. One is, say, focus on China, and that the only thing that matters is China and all other issues should be parked. And the second tendency is that foreign policy is complicated and expensive and not very popular, and it's time to concentrate on domestic policy. And those two tendencies together are very bad news for Europe.
What do you think about the coordination of activity against Russia, Europe activities and United States activities?
We should be doing a lot more. I mean, the United States and the European allies between them are so much bigger and stronger than Russia. We are in a position to dictate terms to the Russians and say we are bigger and stronger than you, and if you get in our way you'll get hurt. That would be a good response. But we don't do it. We see transatlantic disunity, and for that I mostly blame the Europeans, who failed to respond to the Biden administration's attempts to reboot the Atlantic Alliance. But it's also the result of 15-20 years of complacency and neglect, for which both sides are responsible.
What do you think about the campaign in Ukraine now? Authorities begin to campaign of de-oligarchization. Do you believe in, I don't know, that the goals which are announced, they are real goals of this campaign?
Well, I'm sceptical about the term de-oligarchization, and I worry about it being too personalised. I think what you need to have is strong institutions and structures which entrench competition and transparency in the economy. And once you have competition and transparency, then it's much harder for rent-seeking behaviour, which is basically how oligarchs make and continue their fortunes, to continue. So I think reform of all kinds in Ukraine is overdue. There's room for a lot more and for it to go a lot faster.
What do you think, during the last several years, the UK is much more active in Ukraine than it ever been before? I cannot remember the time when the Great Britain was so active. Why we see this tendency, and do you satisfied with this policy?
Well, better late than never, but it could be more. And I think that Brexit's given us a bigger interest in talking to other big countries that are outside the EU, and that is particularly makes Ukraine particularly important. So I'm glad about that, and I think that Britain is waking up to the threat from Russia, and supporting Ukraine has for the last few years been part of our national security strategy towards Russia, and we see the importance of Ukraine. So I'm glad about that, but I would like us to do more.
what Ukraine could do more to engage other great powers in this problem in solving of Russian issues?
Well, I feel very sorry that Ukraine has to bear the burden of this, and 30,000 Ukrainians are dead because of the West's failure to stand up to Russia. So you are paying a very heavy price for our geopolitical education, and I feel I have to apologize for that as an outsider. I think that the stronger the Ukrainian economy is, the stronger the civil society, the more robust and open the political system, and the stronger the institutions are. All that makes it more attractive to outsiders and helps Ukraine's case. I think there's room for more effective Ukrainian diplomacy, and there's plenty of Ukrainian embassies that do a great job, but there are also plenty that do a less great job, and so I would put some more effort into that. And I think also your defence, which is very important. You've transformed your defences compared with 2014, 2015, when you were dealing with the ruins of the Yanukovych era, and I commend you for that, but I think there's probably still more to do.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I talking with a European representative, it's my position. I don't know, is it true? I think that they pay too much attention to some problem of Ukraine. They exaggerate it. We agree
Yes.
that corruption is very important. It's
Yes.
critical, but in face of Russian aggression, it's very strange to say that we don't give you weapon because some your officials
No, I agree.
corrupted.
I mean, I think there is a completely unrealistic expectation in some European countries of why has Ukraine not instantly turned into Estonia, and this is a very it's a great goal to say let's have Estonian standards of public administration and digital economy and so on, but I think that we are failing to understand the depth of the problems in Ukraine and the difficulty of dealing with them, and we should be praising Ukraine for its successes as much as we criticise for the shortcomings. And I actually think Ukraine has done a fantastic job in the last 5-6 years. When you think you had a financial economic crisis, you had a political constitutional crisis, you had a geopolitical security crisis, and any one of them would have been enough to capsize any country that had to deal with it, and you dealt with all three simultaneously, and you've come out the other side. Your economy is growing, your military is strong, your political system is working, and this is a fantastic achievement, and we should be praising you for that.
Mm-hmm. Your book about the future Cold War was quite apocalyptic in that time when it was published, but your prognosis was more or less correct. What's your next prognosis for next decade?
Well, I mean, it's horrible to be proved right. Cassandra, I don't think when the smoke was rising over Troy, Cassandra was dancing for joy saying, I was right, I was right. I'd be much happier if I was wrong. And I think that all the tendencies that I wrote about in the New Cold War, which I wrote in 2007, have broadly continued. And we have seen the growth of this, what we now call hybrid warfare, grey zone warfare. That's I just started noticing that then. It's got a lot worse. The use of energy as a weapon, particularly, which we're seeing right now in Europe, and the growth of a kind of ideological sort of anti-Westernism in Russia, which people dismissed at the time, but it was actually true. I think that the good news is that a lot of the West has started waking up, and we see people, the German Greens, for example, now running the foreign ministry, are talking in remarkably robust terms. We've seen a complete change in Sweden and Finland and in the Nordic countries more generally towards a much more robust policy. And I think that this Nordic-Baltic mini NATO with British backing is going to become increasingly important. But we still face the problem of the decline of the Atlantic Alliance, and I think Europe has to understand that it must take responsibility for its own defence. We can no longer rely on the Americans the way we did, and that's a really serious problem, and Brexit doesn't make it any easier. So I'm never pessimistic, because I've seen too much in my life to be anything other than grateful for what we have now. But I think we face very severe challenges ahead.
And the last questions. I know that maybe these questions repeat some of my previous questions, but what could be done more in help to Ukraine? I understand that nobody will deploy the military units in Ukraine, but which decisive action could show Putin that he should stop?
I think we need to see clear evidence of alliance, unity and resolve. So I think an instant military exercise would be a very good way of showing that we are not frightened by Putin's military bluff. That would be good. I'd also say one more thing, that if we want to get the United States' attention, we have to show that we're solid on China. And I think Lithuania is doing just the right thing by taking a robust stance on Taiwan, and the new Czech government is doing that as well, and the Slovaks have sent a delegation. If I could give one piece of advice to Ukraine, I would say do stuff on China, be nice to Taiwan, stand up to Chinese bullying, close any Confucius institutes, watch out for Chinese infrastructure investment, because that gets you on the radar in Washington in a way that being attacked from Russia doesn't. So it's odd advice. You face one problem, so create another. But I think that would be my suggestion.
And the last question: you observed the collapse of Soviet Union. You observed this collapse of Soviet system in Eastern Europe. And now we see some kind of resurrections, maybe the ideas at least of Soviet Union. Is it the same Soviet Union that was previously, or this is some transformation of this idea?
No, it's worse. It's worse in the sense that it's no longer handicapped by communist economics, which didn't work. The great advantage we had in dealing with the Soviet Union was that the planned economy didn't generate the right kind of investment to stay competitive, and it didn't generate the kind of consumer goods to keep people happy. And this kind of crony capitalism system they have in Russia now is much more resilient. It still doesn't anything like meet Russia's potential. Russia could be doing so much better. But it's resilient and durable, and it means that Putin is not dealing with the economic emergency that was the daily backdrop for certainly Brezhnev, and before him other Soviet leaders as well. Obviously we don't have the kind of genocidal, murderous policies of the Stalin era, and that's something to be thankful for, although we do see them to an extent in China. But I think that the great weakness we have is that we treat capitalist countries as if they're inherently good and like us. And in fact, you can have capitalist countries, Russia and China being examples, which are our enemies. And we have to see that really clearly and not just try and make money by doing business with them.